AskReddit by SpareAd 3924. What is something serious going on in the world that a lot of people aren't aware of? France is opting to destroy an incredible massive coral reef in Tahiti, a whole ecosystem that takes so much time for marine life to develop, to build an aluminum judge tower for the 2024 Olympics. ITHK, this is disgraceful. That's disgusting, WTF. Top soil quality. Genuinely good answer. Far fewer people are aware of this than the various wars. I'd add the decline in insect population. 9 years after the Yazidi genocide, there are still thousands of Yazidi girls missing and enslaved. The story of that poor woman being fed her own child breaks my heart. In Yemen, there's been the biggest humanitarian crisis of the world for more than 8 years now. Millions of people are without water, shelter, electricity, 80% are children. Antibiotic resistance. It genuinely scares me how there's people dying every year from being infected by superbugs, having to let them die from a sepsis as there are no effective antibiotics for them. And it'll only get worse. People just keep taking antibiotics without respecting the recommended dose as if they're sweets. The overuse of antibiotics in farming is of much greater concern. Stuffing animals full of antibiotics is a way to have animals being kept in cramped, filthy conditions while reducing loss due to sickness caused by the filth. Factory farming isn't just an animal welfare issue, it's a public health issue. This wasn't the right thread to wander into when you can't sleep at 3 AM. You're right, Pickles McBeef. Microplastic covering every inch of the planet. It was found in breast milk too. And in people's blood. Foreign entities buying up water rights in the USA. Clean, sustainable water sources are being bought and controlled by corporations. Public utilities won't exist. Whoever has the money will get the water. Won't be the farmer. I've been saying the next world war will be over freshwater access. I'm dumb and uninformed generally, but it does feel inevitable at the current trajectory. There's ethnic cleansing happening in Darfur, Sudan. Been happening. Back in college at Boston University in 2005, there were flyers everywhere begging students for support. For the past 2 years, residents in southern Madagascar have been suffering from a terrible drought. Over 1 million people went hungry. Till Madagascar has more people than Australia. We are fishing the ocean to depletion and there's no sign of it stopping. Unregulated fishing is tearing up the ocean floor. They're killing sharks and whales to get more fish. It's destroying the ecosystem and no one cares because they like to eat fish. Not to mention krill being harvested to make nutritional supplements. Everyone seems to be so stressed and not happy. Researchers believe that this is a reason mass shootings have increased so much in the last few years, even though crime in general has declined. For a lot of shooters, a mass shooting is just a complicated suicide, so as suicides increase, mass shootings will as well. Those two, as well as drug overdoses, are called deaths of despair. Groundwater depletion. Residential property is being gobbled up by private equity firms and people are unable to afford homes. This is way too far down. This is the checkmate for billionaires. We will be fully enslaved and totally helpless when they own all of the homes. The fun, cheap clothes everyone buys at places like H&M, Target, or cheap merchandise, are contributing to 70% of the world's water pollution. Buy less and keep things for longer. Pretty much all synthetic fibers that make our clothes, carpets, furniture etc. will up in the nature as the microplastics. That lint in your dryer is microplastics. More and more people are suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. and how hard it is to get help for it and find doctors who even believe it's a real physical condition and not just depression. At least in my country, which is overall considered a progressive society with a high level of healthcare and educated doctors. My friend has me CFS and had lost her ability to walk and do almost anything, and she's in bed, in severe pain and chronic fever most of the day. And she still can't get much help from anywhere because most doctors don't believe her, even when they see that she can't stand or dress herself, make her own food, etc. There is a worldwide shortage of veterinarians, and the ones that are left are committing suicide at 2-4x the rate of the general population. Older figures pre-pandemic. Although recent figures aren't available, anecdotally the suicide crisis is getting worse. Yep. There's a great podcast on this somewhere. When your patients are being put down on a regular basis because clients don't have the money to care for them, that's fucking depressing. The depletion of aquifers and water reserves. We are using more water than the water sources have time to replenish themselves. Humans' access to fresh water is roughly 3% of the Earth's water, and half it is locked away behind ice that we are slowly losing because of increased temperatures. To add to this, more than 1/3 of the corn grown in the US is turned to biofuel. And ethanol, biofuel, is only 10% of gasoline at most gas stations. We're using water from depleting aquifers in the Great Plains to grow corn that promptly gets fed to cars. Source: https://afdc.energy.gov/data/mobile/10339. Lots of Native American girls and women are going missing in mass both in the US and Canada, and there doesn't seem to be any major effort from the governments to figure out why. Stacey Dooley did a good documentary episode on this in Canada. It's on BBC iPlayer if anyone overseas has a VPN and wants to watch. Hopefully someone better informed can elaborate on or debunk this, but don't huge multinationals have a grip on seeds? As in, fields planted today do not produce seeds that will germinate, and every crop requires purchasing seeds again. This is an awful lot of power concentrated in a few companies, isn't it? Check out the movie Seed: The Untold Story. And, if you're a gardener, buy open-pollinated, organic, non-GMO seeds from your bioregion and then save the seeds that grow from them to pass around at seed swaps. Nearly everything we consume is tainted with slave labor somewhere in the supply chain. Not just slave labor but also forced child labor. Nothing is worth consuming because there is some ethical violation that we just don't see. We're so disconnected from the hands that make the clothes on our backs, the food we eat, our technology and objects we buy, we don't see how much suffering we're indirectly causing. This, along with global warming's devastating effects, animal cruelty, lack of conservation of natural resources. https://www.dol.gov/ilab/child_labor_reports/tda2019/2020_final.pdf. If you haven't watched it, this is kind of the plot to the TV show The Good Place. Getting a good life review is hard because everything you do is tainted, from the clothes you wear to the food you eat. Water scarcity is the near future and very few people is really concerned of that. How terrible the education system is. And just how many children are being medicated to fit into an outdated system. We are doing wrong, man. We are doing the children wrong. Oceans are full of plastic. The whole world is covered with microplastic. Every square inch is contaminated. Even the most remote place on the planet there is microplastic in breast milk, and we are still using petroleum-based textiles that shed like crazy. All my life I've heard how everything is going to collapse any moment. I'm in my mid-30s now, and instead of listening to this nonsense, I wish I had went to school and did something with my life. Man, I was just thinking this the other day. I honestly didn't expect to live into my 30s the way my life was growing up and the decisions I was making in my late teens early 20s. I'm in my 30s now and man I wish I could go back in time and tell my younger self how fucking dumb I am. My cat's food bowl, though full, hasn't been refilled in quite some time, maybe even minutes. More on this pressing story as it unfolds. Pray for mittens. We are in the 6th mass extinction event in life's billion-plus year history, which is being directly caused by human pollution, overconsumption, and disregard for our environment. The insect population is collapsing, the oceans are being overfished. Put this together with climate change, chemical and microplastic pollution, none of gestures broadly is worth the damage to the only planet that can sustain us. People love to point out humans are at the top of the food chain without realizing what a vulnerable position that leaves us in if all the complex networks of species we rely on collapse. We need to do better. If the methane clathrates, methane frozen in ice at the bottom of the ocean, melt quickly, we could get runaway climate change that will make segments of the planet completely uninhabitable without air conditioning and almost certainly destroy civilization. I read an apocalyptic novel a while back where the clathrate gun hypothesis became a reality and shit hit the fan fast. The deposits melted, evaporated out of the water, and caused massive explosions all over the world. Always interesting and terrifying to find out another way we could all be doomed. The extinction of predators in the food chain. Which is bad. Because predators are our friends. They keep the hordes of secondary predators at bay. Once the predators fall, we're at the mercy of an even larger number of secondary predators, which in many ways could be worse for us, because we haven't developed immunities to them yet, and because they will come at us in much larger numbers. Extinction of various insects and degradation of the soil. Sewage contamination of drinking water. Killed my toddler son. The fight Muslim women in Muslim countries dare to do against their dictators' oppressors. It is really brave and dangerous. They have all my respect. The near extinction of bee populations. I think there is some niche awareness of this problem, but most people don't realize how we will starve to death if we lose them all. Deep sea marine methane hydrates are reaching melting point. Myanmar government is in danger of collapse. The world collectively experienced trauma at the same time, in real time, the global pandemic. I'm not suggesting everyone has PTSD or even trauma symptoms, but I don't think we've been able to process how it's changed most of us, for better or for worse, mostly worse, on all fronts. In my niche healthcare industry, molecular diagnostics in clinical lab, we talk about COVID PTSD as if we're discussing the weather. Everyone deals with it. I'm sort of a consultant now, and when I travel to a new lab we trade war stories and compare our longest shifts or longest stretches without a day off. We were under so much scrutiny and public criticism when TBH we've been underfunded, severely understaffed and forgotten about for decades. Our workloads some days were 20x larger than normal. I saw and experienced so much horror, and though we all talk amongst ourselves about the trauma, nothing is being done to make it better, and in fact COVID was just the beginning of the end for American healthcare. Nothing ever will get better. I think it's important that the whales are fighting back against humans being in the oceans anymore. There is a group of individuals in China who have a cat torture group and post videos of the torture on Telegram, TikTok. Unfortunately, the laws in China are shit and no one is stopping them. You can get more information from the Instagram Feline Guardians. Please sign the petitions and spread awareness. It is utterly horrific. All the animal rescue videos you see here on Reddit and TikTok are setups and animal torture videos. Feel like I'm the only one reporting them and they get 20k upvotes. Cantaloupes are killing people in Canada. US and Canada. Third death in US. 5 deaths in Canada reported in salmonella outbreak linked to cantaloupe. https:// www.cnn.com/2023/12/07/health/salmonella-outbreak-cantaloupe-deaths/index.html. Due to global warming, fungi are adapting to live in hotter climates, which is making them able to live in on the human body. It's not The Last of Us, but it's going to be a huge global health problem for the foreseeable future. South America is reaching a boiling point and very close to several wars. In the US, our older generations may be exhibiting occult mental degradation, decreased impulse or emotional control, critical thinking skills, due to childhood lead exposure. https://www.ncbi.nlm.gov/pmc/articles/pmc6454899/closed bracket dash, and it's only going to get worse if this hypothesis is accurate. Increase in mental health problems due to social media. Long AU%2F and AMP. Source FEPATH equals MTM5MTE3LDI4NGI2 and AMP. Feature equals M logo. And how many people won't know what hit them until there is obvious damage? Yeah, know what? I'm not reading this thread. I don't need more anxiety in my life. Too late, I did, and you shouldn't be anxious, you should be depressed. 75% of the insect life has died out over the last 30 years. Without insects, the food chain collapses. Edit. 75% is on the higher end of the findings. Consensus seems to be between a third and 3/4. Yeah, no, I thought there were more bugs when I was a kid. I support bees and other pollinators, but these roaches and murder hornets got to go. I don't believe boomers or the older end of Generation X truly understand how bad the news edits politicians and takes things out of context to manipulate the public. I think they still trust the news to do and say the right things, and that they don't believe the news could ever do anything just for money. Getting my 75-year-old mother away from cable news is depressing because she's so upset and scared all the time. She believes everything they say and is sacred shitless. I hate what it's done to the older generations. It's starting to come to light for some of them that they grew up with Walter Cronkite and Rather. When the news wasn't lying. The news is destroying America. The abject minority of elites manufacturing wars and controlling politics to further their own interests and remain in power. Recycling is fake. Countries including the United States send their recyclables to countries like China and Japan, who in turn toss it all in the ocean. The recycling cost pushed past the tipping point for China, and they've since stopped accepting foreign garbage. There's basically another cupboard-like thing going on in China again. WHO wants to go in and check and asks China for information, but China refuses and claims that it's a known pathogen. But reports from various netizens show that there's basically a huge lockdown happening in China again, and the kids' hospital are filled every single day. I'm a researcher who has been following this. It's more likely that it is a known pathogen that is just impacting children at higher than expected rates, because COVID infection can damage the immune system. That's why things like white lung and other bacterial infections are being reported at higher rates across the world. It's a symptom of letting the virus spread rampantly and reinfect people multiple times.